Military action has faded from the headlines. Maduro appears in New York. Public attention shifted, but global strategy didn't. It begins not with a bang, but with a lie, painted on steel in the middle of the ocean. 3 days ago, a vessel fleeing the Caribbean, a metal leviathan carrying the lifeblood of a sanctioned nation, executed a desperate, ingenious act of rebirth. Its crew, under cover of darkness and digital silence, hauled out brushes and paint. They covered the old name on its hull, Bella 1, and daubed a new one, Marinara. Then, with a stroke of defiance, meant for satellites and warships, they painted a massive Russian flag on its deck. With a few bureaucratic keystrokes in a distant office, the ship was reborn, reflagged, and re-registered under the authority of the Russian state. Tonight, that ship is not in the warm waters of the Caribbean. It is 230 miles off the coast of Ireland, moving through the cold, gray swells of the North Atlantic. And it is not alone. A Russian submarine glides silently in the deep below it. Surface vessels cut through the waves ahead. They are an escort, a mobile wall of sovereignty. Above, American P-8 Poseidon aircraft, submarine hunters with sophisticated sensors, circle like birds of prey. U.S. Coast Guard cutters stand by over the horizon. We are witnessing a slow-motion, high-seas collision between two nuclear powers, triggered not by a missile launch, but by an oil tanker's new coat of paint. This is the secret move that quietly changed the Atlantic power game. The airstrikes in Venezuela are over. The press conferences have moved on. But the crisis hasn't ended. It has metastasized. It has evolved from a targeted military operation in Caracas into a sprawling, multi-front challenge that is testing the very architecture of international order. What we are seeing is the dangerous alchemy of modern conflict, where economic sanctions meet maritime law, regional sovereignty meets global power politics, and a single ship can become the tripwire for something far greater. This is not the story you think you know. This is the story of what happens when a blockade begins to leak, when allies begin to dissent, and when rivals see an opening. This is about the Marinara and the hundreds of shadowy vessels like it that form a ghost armada slipping through the world's oceans. It is about a border mobilization in Colombia that signals a profound shift in Latin American unity. It is about diplomatic meetings where longtime partners are choosing new sides. The question is no longer about the fate of a single regime in Caracas. The question is whether the international system, already strained and cracking, can contain this conflict, or whether the conflict will shatter what little cohesion remains. On December 16th, the announcement was made with characteristic grandeur, a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil traffic to and from Venezuela. The language painted a picture of an iron cordon, a noose tightened by the largest armada ever assembled in South American history. The world imagined a static wall of warships, a true siege. The reality is a chaotic, high-tech game of maritime hide-and-seek on a scale few can comprehend. Since the initial operation in Caracas, at least 16 oil tankers have successfully vanished from the sanctioned Venezuelan ports and slipped past the American naval presence. They carried over 4 million barrels of crude. Another 12 vessels, loaded with a further 8 million barrels, departed in what analysts describe as a wholesale, synchronized exodus. This isn't a handful of lucky runners. This is a coordinated evacuation executed with the precision of a military maneuver. These are the phantoms of the global economy, the dark fleet. Imagine a shadow navy of over 1,400 tankers, a parallel maritime universe operating outside the rules. Their primary weapon is invisibility. They toggle off their automatic identification system, AIS transponders, the digital heartbeats that broadcast a ship's location, course, and speed to prevent collisions. Or, more cunningly, they spoof them, broadcasting false coordinates that show the vessel bobbing peacefully in the Gulf of Oman when it is actually navigating the Caribbean shallows. It's a digital hall of mirrors. And here is the fatal flaw in the blockade strategy. Of this dark fleet serving Venezuela, only 40% are actually under explicit U.S. sanctions. The remaining 60%, hundreds of vessels, exist in a legal gray zone. They are ghosts hunting other ghosts. The U.S. has scored victories. The seizures of the skipper and the sentries were complex, daring operations involving special operations teams, fast roping from helicopters. But 2 seizures amid dozens of successful escapes is not a blockade. It is a disruptive nuisance. It is like trying to stop a river with a sieve. The economic pressure this was meant to create, the rapid strangulation of the Venezuelan state by cutting off the 90% of export revenue that comes from oil, is leaking away. Storage tanks are filling, yes, production is slowing, but the lifeblood is still flowing. The system is adapting in real time, and in its adaptation, it is creating something new and far more dangerous. A direct incentive for these phantom ships to seek the protection of a rival power. The Marinara is not an anomaly, it is a prototype. But what happens next will change everything, because the chase of the Marinara is not just about one ship, it is a live fire test of a terrifying new doctrine. What occurs in the cold Atlantic off Ireland will write the rulebook for every future confrontation, from the Strait of Hormuz to the South China Sea. And while the world's eyes are on that ticking clock in the ocean, a second, equally profound crisis is igniting on land, along a jungle border that holds the key to an entire continent's future. While the world holds its breath over a tanker in the North Atlantic, a land border over 4,000 miles away is transforming into a front line. The 2,219-kilometer frontier between Colombia and Venezuela, a winding river of jungle, mountain, and dust, is now humming with the movement of troops and the grim preparations for a crisis no one wants. Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a former leftist guerrilla-turned-statesman, has mobilized his security forces. Additional units deploy, emergency protocols click into place. His statement was not just for domestic consumption. It was a shot across the bow of hemispheric politics. An attack on Venezuela is an attack on Latin America. Consider the seismic weight of that phrase. Colombia is not Cuba or Nicaragua, historical thorns in Washington's side. Colombia is the cornerstone U.S. ally in South America, a multi-billion-dollar recipient of military aid, a partner in the drug war, a democratic bulwark. For its leader to condemn U.S. military action and position his nation as a defender of Venezuelan sovereignty is not a minor diplomatic disagreement. It is an earthquake. Petro is drawing a red line, not based on ideology alone, but on cold, hard pragmatism. This border is not just a line on a map. It is a living tissue. Families span it. Informal trade worth millions flows across it every day. And over the past decade, it has been crossed by millions of Venezuelan refugees fleeing economic collapse, a human wave absorbed primarily by Colombia. Petro's nightmare is not Nicolas Maduro. It is what comes after. A power vacuum, fractured military, and the blossoming of armed groups that would turn the borderlands into a lawless zone, flooding Colombia with more refugees, violence, and narco-trafficking. His mobilization is a defensive quarantine. He's not protecting a dictator. He is insulating his country from the blast wave of an intervention he believes will inevitably fail. The chorus of dissent. A hemisphere finds its voice. Petro's stance is not a solitary voice crying in the wilderness. It is the lead note in a chorus of regional condemnation that is striking in its unity and coordination. Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Uruguay, and even Spain issued a joint statement, a synchronized diplomatic rebuke that signals a new era in inter-American relations. Brazil's President Lula da Silva framed it in apocalyptic terms, calling the strikes an unacceptable line crossed, the first step toward a world of violence, chaos, and instability. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum, while maintaining working relations with Washington on trade and migration, condemned the threat to regional stability. This is the delicate new dance of Latin American diplomacy, condemning Washington's action without severing the relationship. It reflects a fundamental power shift. A generation ago, such unified pushback would have been unthinkable. U.S. economic dominance was overwhelming. Today, China is the top trading partner for most of South America. Chinese investment has built the ports, roads, and energy grids. This economic diversification has translated into diplomatic independence. Latin American nations are no longer supplicants. They are stakeholders with alternatives. When the U.S. acts unilaterally, violates sovereignty, and bypasses multilateral forms, these countries can now afford to say no, and they are saying it together. This collective no is born from a deep historical memory. The ghosts of past interventions, Guatemala in 1954, Chile in 1973, Nicaragua in the 1980s, Panama in 1989, linger in the collective consciousness. The current operation is seen not as a novel response to a unique crisis, but as the latest chapter in a long, painful history of gunboat diplomacy. The unifying principle is no longer anti-Americanism, but a profound commitment to the principle of non-intervention. It is a regional immune system kicking in, and its effects will long outlast the current crisis. The stage of legitimacy. A battle lost in New York. This shift was crystallized in the emergency session of the UN Security Council on December 20th. The usual suspects condemned the U.S. Russia denounced piracy and banditry. China decried a violation of international law. Iran called it outright piracy. Predictable, perhaps. But the damage was not in their words. It was in the arena itself. The United States was forced onto the defensive in the world's premier body for international peace and security. Even as its veto power guaranteed no punishing resolution would pass, it lost something more valuable: the narrative, the moral high ground. Now, every time Washington condemns Russia's actions in Ukraine or China's in the South China Sea, Moscow and Beijing can point to the Caribbean and say, "You do it too." They weaponize American hypocrisy. This creates a corrosive credibility deficit. International law functions on a fragile perception of fairness, that the rules apply to the strong as well as the weak. When that perception shatters, the system reverts to pure power politics. The UN Secretary General's expression of deep alarm was the diplomatic equivalent of a distress flare. It signaled a recognition that a major power was eroding the very norms that hold the system together, and the tools to stop it are functionally non-existent. And this is where the video takes a shocking turn. Because the real explosion is not happening in meeting rooms or on borders. It is happening in the hidden multi-trillion-dollar circuitry of global finance and maritime trade. The US blockade is failing not just because of Russian submarines or Latin American unity, but because it is crashing against a vast, agile, and amoral shadow economy that exists solely to evade such controls. This is the world of the Dark Fleet, and it is winning. To understand why a superpower's navy is being outmaneuvered by commercial tankers, you must step into the hidden economy of the Dark Fleet. This is not merely a group of ships. It is a fully formed alternative ecosystem with its own insurers, financiers, captains, and ports of call. It is the parasite that thrives on the body of global sanctions. And it is built for one purpose: to make the illegal legal, to make the invisible profitable. Imagine a Russian doll of obfuscation. A tanker like the Marinara is owned by a shell company registered in the Seychelles, which is owned by another trust in Dubai, managed by a firm in Singapore, and insured by a consortium in Latvia that doesn't ask questions. Its cargo is sold on the water in a chain of trade so complex that its final owner is untraceable. Payment is made in a mix of cryptocurrencies, gold, or bartered goods. This is the art of sanctioned trade, refined to a science. The economic pressure the US seeks to impose is real but blunted. Venezuelan storage is filling, production is dipping. But with over 900 Dark Fleet tankers already under various Western sanctions, these operators have nothing left to lose. They specialize in high-risk, high-reward cargoes. The markup on a successful shipment of sanctioned Venezuelan or Iranian oil can be 30% or more. For them, the US blockade is not a wall. It is a hurdle that justifies a higher price. They have turned American pressure into a business model. And this is where Russia's escort of the Marinara is a masterstroke. It is not just about protecting oil, it is about marketing a service. By offering its flag and its navy as a protective shield, Russia is advertising itself as the guarantor of the Dark Fleet. For a fee, or for a strategic favor, any sanctioned state or rogue operator can now go Russian. This transforms every future interdiction from a law enforcement action into a potential NATO-Russia confrontation. It raises the stakes exponentially. How many US presidents will risk a naval clash with Russia over a cargo of oil? The calculus of enforcement just changed forever. The unverified war, fog in the digital age. Amid this high-stakes game, a secondary battle is raging in the realm of perception. Your social media feed is likely a battleground. Grainy videos show helicopters hovering over tankers, armed personnel fast roping onto decks. Dramatic narration claims multiple seizures. Some of this is real. The seizure of the skipper was documented. But much is recycled footage from old exercises, video game clips, or outright fabrications. This information fog is a weapon. For the US, unverified videos of successful boardings project an image of overwhelming control. For adversaries, they paint a picture of American aggression and desperation. For the public, they create a confused, emotional reality that outpaces facts. In an age where everyone is a broadcaster, the truth becomes a casualty of velocity. We are not just witnessing a naval standoff. We are witnessing a race between events and the narrative used to explain them. This erosion of shared reality makes de-escalation harder, miscalculation easier, and rational analysis a luxury. The ripple in the market, a precedent of force. Surprisingly, global oil markets have yawned. Prices barely twitched. Venezuela's output is now a marginal drop in a global ocean of supply. But traders are not fools. They're watching the precedent, not the barrel count. The unspoken question now hangs over every trading pit and government ministry. If the US can use naval power to enforce an oil blockade on Venezuela, what stops it from doing the same to Iran? Or, in a future crisis, to Russia itself? The precedent being set is that sanctions enforcement can morph into quasi-naval warfare. It blurs the line between economic policy and acts of war. It signals that, in the 21st century, great power competition may be fought not with tank battles over capitals, but with Coast Guard cutters seizing cargo ships over commodity flows. This is how empires clash in a globalized world. Not over territory, but over supply chains. Most people never hear the next part. And that's the real danger. They see a tanker chase or a border mobilization as isolated events. They miss the terrifying pattern being woven together. We are witnessing the accidental assembly of a perfect storm. A leaky blockade incentivizing risky behavior. A regional backlash closing diplomatic doors. A shadow economy exploiting the chaos. And two great powers inching toward a direct confrontation over a symbol. All the while, the original goal, a stable, compliant Venezuela, recedes further into the distance. The final piece of this puzzle is not about what is happening now, but what this means for the future of American power and the world it once dominated. The unraveling order and the cold conclusion. So, where does this leave us? The Venezuela operation has become a case study in the limits of unilateral power in an interconnected multipolar world. Washington's playbook, overwhelming force, economic strangulation, regime change, is meeting a new set of defenses: agile shadow networks, regional solidarity, and the opportunistic sponsorship of a rival superpower. The crisis is no longer contained. It has become diagnostic, revealing the deep fractures in the international system. The early, quiet assumption was that American power, once decisively applied, would be sufficient. The blockade would tighten, the economy would crater, the regime would fold, and a new order would be installed. Instead, we see adaptation and resistance at every turn. The blockade leaks, the tankers mutate, Colombia mobilizes, Brazil condemns, Russia intervenes. Each actor, from the captain of a dark fleet vessel to the president of a regional power, is making a rational choice within a system that is no longer dictated by a single set of rules. This is the strategic cost that never appears in a Pentagon budget line item: the erosion of soft power, the incentive for decoupling. Every nation watching, from European capitals to Asian trading hubs, is drawing a sobering lesson. Over-reliance on American-dominated systems is a strategic vulnerability. The response will not be dramatic declarations of war, but quiet, relentless work. Diversifying currency reserves, building alternative payment systems like China's CAPs, investing in sovereign satellite tracking to bypass US GPS, and forging security partnerships that don't require Washington's blessing. We are witnessing the gradual, unglamorous end of one world order and the painful, chaotic birth of another. The post-Cold War, rules-based international system was always underwritten by American power and willingness to act as a reluctant sheriff. Now, the sheriff is seen by many as acting outside the law, and the other patrons of the global town are building their own saloons, banks, and security details. The system is fracturing into spheres of influence and competing rulebooks. History's rhyme, the echo of overreach. History never repeats, but its echoes are unmistakable. This moment rhymes with past imperial overreach, when a dominant power, convinced of its own righteousness and capability, attempts to reshape a distant society and discovers that force can topple a government but cannot manufacture legitimacy or control consequences. The chaos that follows, the refugee crises, the militant safe havens, the geopolitical vacuums filled by adversaries, becomes a lasting legacy. Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan taught this lesson on land. Venezuela is writing a new chapter at sea. The final image is hauntingly calm. Somewhere in the cold, dark North Atlantic, a Russian submarine, a creature of pure geopolitical intent, shadows a repainted oil tanker. American surveillance aircraft trace lazy, watchful circles far above. It is a silent, slow-motion ballet of potential force. Both sides are committed. Both sides are testing. Both sides are waiting to see who blinks. The airstrikes are over, but the real crisis is just beginning. It is a crisis of authority, of order, and of a world learning to operate without a single conductor. The chase of the Marinara will end. The ship will either be seized, escape, or become a permanent floating pawn. But the game it revealed, a game of ghost fleets, eroded alliances, and great power brinksmanship over global flows, has only just entered its first dangerous move. This was never just about Venezuela. It was a stress test for the 21st century. And so far, the system is failing. If you want to understand the hidden economic battles that are reshaping our world, the shadow fleets, the sanction evasions, the silent financial wars, you need to go deeper than the headlines. Subscribe to Economic Tales, where we decode the complex stories of money, power, and global strategy. Because the next crisis won't start with a bomb. It will start with a transaction. Don't just watch history, understand the forces that are writing it. Subscribe now.